All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on handling emergency communications in other languages. My name is Sanna Antila, and I am the communication officer at INA, and it's my pleasure to open this session today. For those of you who might join us for the first time, INA works to improve emergency communications across Europe, and we provide a platform for emergency services professionals to share best practices and address common challenges. And today's webinar is also part of our ongoing commitment to support this knowledge sharing. And I am pleased to welcome our speaker, Gianluca Gembrani from the 112 Response Center of the Autonomous Province of Trento, who will present their experience in managing multilingual emergency calls through a third-party translation service. And today he will present how using a third-party translation service has helped them improve communication with foreign callers, and also talk about the challenges such as reliability, confidentiality, and quality monitoring. And in the end, you will have a chance to ask questions in a Q&A session, and also share your own experiences if you so wish. And thank you, Gianluca, for joining us today. And before we begin, a few housekeeping points. This webinar is being recorded, so you can access the recording later on our website. And since we are using Zoom, there are automatically translated captions available. You can see here on the screen how you can turn them on if you wish. And so in the bottom line, there's the captions, and you can turn them on if you want to see them in any other language. And if you have any questions, you can submit them through the Q&A feature. And I would encourage you to use this and not the chat, just because it's a bit easier for us to keep track of them. And in the end, also, if you would like to share your own experiences with this topic, you can always raise your hand and we can give the floor to you after Gianluca's presentation. And I think he was eager to hear other people's experiences as well. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Gianluca, who will present his topic for you today. Thank you, Gianluca, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sanna, and good afternoon, everybody. I'll try to share my screen. We tested it, so it should work. Okay. So, first of all, I will start by thanking Ina for hosting with this webinar, and thank you for being here today. My name is Gianluca Cembrani. I represent the 112 PSAP of Trento. Today we'll be talking about a challenge that I'm sure that you all know, how to handle emergency communication in other languages and all the challenges that this topic gives us. We will explore the advantages of using a third-party interpretation service. I'll show you some data to understand the impact of these calls in our region. We will discuss some technology we use, mostly to understand what language are we talking about. And I will focus about why we choose an external provider, the costs involved, and mostly the immense value that it adds to our systems. My goal isn't to sell you this model, but to share with you a real-world case study that it might help you in your own operation. So let's get started. Just for full transparency, my role is strictly operational, and my relationship with the translation provider is just as a client, which is supervising the contract execution and quality control. I don't want to promote any specific commercial product or model. Okay, so let's start by setting the scene. Who are we? We operate the 112 PSAP for the Autonomous Province of Trento, which is located in the northern part of Italy. We cover a territory of roughly 550K inhabitants, and 70% of our region is mountainous terrain. To manage this area, our response center relies on a team of 30 call takers. And despite our relatively small size, I would say, we process approximately 270K emergency calls per year. To understand the operational challenges, you must understand our economy. Our province is really a prime tourist destination. Tourism here is not just a sector, it's just the backbone of our region. Being home to the Dolomites and the northern tip of the Garda Lake, I don't know if you know them, but we attract millions of visitors all year around, whether it's for winter skiing on the Dolomites or summer hiking with beautiful lakes view or experiencing one of the outdoor activities that our region offer. Our territory is really designed to host a massive influx of international guests, which makes us really a, a truly tourism-driven territory. So this chart gives you the number of the tourists. In 2024, we hosted nearly 5 million tourists, which is a figure that is 10 times actually that our resident population. We are managing a floating population of 5 million people, where 40% of the influx come from abroad. And this creates a dual challenge for us as a PSAP, a massive surge in call volume potential based on tourism, and combined with a high probability that these callers will face a language barrier during an emergency call. What also comes with tourists, besides all the benefits that they bring to our territory? Well, emergency call. By looking at this chart, you actually might assume that handling non-Italian speakers is a marginal issue compared to our standard workload. However, each of these 2,600 calls carries what I would call a complexity multiplier, because if you add a linguistic barrier in emergency calls, you are basically introducing latency. And also, I want to point out that also for the call taker, we are adding stress and cognitive load on them. Therefore, while the volume may look small from this chart, the operational impact that we face is actually huge. And it's not just about the number of the calls, it's about the challenge that we face. Let's look closer. By breaking down the data month by month, this is 2024, by the way, the small challenge begins to show its true weight. In this chart, we have cross-referenced the emergency calls handled in foreign languages, which are the bars, with the arrival of foreign tourists, which is the line. And as you can see, the two are linked. The correlation is evident, I guess so. Assume that tourist influx rises, especially in summer and during the winter. The demand for foreign language support spikes instantly. So this confirms that our operational stress it's really dictated by the tourism seasonality. The challenge is not just growing, it's escalating. If you look at the 2025 column, the data speaks for itself. Even if the year is not yet concluded, we have already shattered all our historical records. And this trend confirms that, at least to us, that managing foreign language calls is no longer an occasional task, as it was maybe some years ago, but it's becoming a core requirement for our service. So regarding the potential approaches to managing these foreign calls, INA itself has published a really comprehensive document regarding language barriers in emergency services. And it's a document that provides a detailed analysis of every option listed on the slide. And I strongly recommend you to have a read. It's a pretty long document and it's full of details. I'll just quickly run through the possible options with the main pros and cons. The first approach is simply forwarding the call to another PSAP, and the main advantage is also it's financial. It requires you no extra investment because you're using an existing infrastructure. The downside is that it requires procedures between PSAPs, which have to be well established, and it often generates, it could generate a ping pong effect between the two PSAPs because you're forwarding the call to another PSAP, which will handle the call in another language, and then will call you back to tell what happened and to dispatch your resources. So yeah, that's the main. These are the main pros and cons. The second option is relying on internal multilingual staff. You basically hire operators who are fluent in multiple languages. The upside is speed. There is no latency, and a local call taker understands the territory, the social context far better than any external interpreter. The downside is scalability. Hiring polyglots, call takers, expensive, and it's hard to scale. How many language can you cover with this model? You cannot have a call taker for every language, which on duty all the times. Third approach is using a third-party translation service, and that's the core topic of today's webinar. We will analyze the pros and the cons in depth in the next session, so I will just skip that. You could also leverage volunteer networks. The upside is that volunteers are often highly motivated and do have an invaluable knowledge of local dialects that global providers usually miss. The downside is reliability. We cannot guarantee the availability. Organizing a volunteer roster creates a really heavy task on the administration, and it implies some questions about liability. Technology, well, of course, technology is already acting as a bridge for linguistic gaps, and it's accelerating day by day. Digital solution in emergency will assume an increasingly central position, evolving from support tools into structural components of our daily operation, and I'm pretty sure all of you are already seeing that. So the solution we adopted is the third-party translation service. The decision actually to use an external provider for emergency call translation is not a specific choice made by my PSAP in Trento, but it rather comes from a provision of the Italian 112 regulation. Therefore, the model that I'm presenting you today is more or less the same across all 112 in Italy. How does it work? Well, it really straightforward. When you're handling a call in another language, basically the 112 call taker places the communication on hold. It dials the interpretation service, and an interpreted three-way conference starts between the caller and the 112 call taker. Looks a pretty simple scheme. Let's step back for a moment and walk through the phases of a foreign emergency call. In other words, what happens from the moment that the phone rings? Well, the process starts with the most immediate challenge, which is language recognition. When a call is generated by a foreign SIM, our first clue is the international prefix, the country code, and we rely on our CAD system to speed up this process. The software is intelligent enough to identify the country code, and it instantly prompts the operator with the likely language spoken by the caller. And this really saves a lot of time during the initial assessment of the call. Of course, this is a suggestion which is based on the country code, as the user might be a tourist using a different roaming SIM, but statistically, and I'll show you, it's a very strong indicator, at least in our experience. It's also possible that the caller being abroad will default to English as a common language. We see that every day. So we need to confirm whether the CAD suggestion matches the user native language or if they're just using English to get by. We mentioned that the country code is statistically a good indicator of the user language, and I want to analyze to what extent the vast majority of the call which requires our interpretation service do indeed originate from foreign SIM cards. We cannot perform any correspondence analysis for the calls that are originating from Italian SIM cards. However, by knowing the country code and the specific language requested from the interpretation service for that single call, we can determine if and to what extent there is a match between the two. And indeed, the match is there. In over 80% of the calls, there is a direct correspondence between the SIM's country of origin and one of the official languages spoken in that nation. Also, please keep in mind that how should we interpret the remaining 20% of non-matches? Because in many cases, we simply defaulted to English. Maybe the caller chose to communicate in English and he did so without any particular issue. He was really proficient in it. So even though their SIM card and native language was coming from a different country, we just used English because it just matches the user knowledge of that language. And if you're curious about it, it's just a really clever Excel formula that takes two different tables with all the calls, all the country codes, and another table with the country codes and the official languages of that country. So what can we do about to determine the language that is spoken about the calls that originates from Italian SIM cards or the foreign ones where the language isn't immediately obvious? Ideally, we would leverage AML data to read the handset OS language, and this would solve the issue. But on our domestic side, actually, our infrastructure doesn't parse the language tag yet, which is routed through AML. And on international side, AML in roaming has not been fully enabled yet in Italy, with the exception of some experimental testing on a limited number of Android devices. So we cannot leverage on AML for this issue. Let's look at other ways to identify the language. Well, the first method is the most straightforward. Simply ask in English. While the caller may not be fluent in English, the question uses really very basic vocabulary, and there is a chance that the user will recognize the phrase and respond with the name or the language or maybe their country. A quick side note on this topic: although we rely on an external interpretation service, a minimum B1 level in English is a mandatory hiring requirement for our call takers. And our administration strongly believes that language skills are really a strategic asset. So we do actively support the learning by offering paid study leave for the call takers and partially reimbursing language courses also. Our administration even provide a significant financial incentive for the operators if they can certify proficiency in at least two foreign languages. They can receive a salary bonus of up to 10%, depending on the certification levels. Another method is to use an interactive voice response system. Basically, the caller listens to a pre-recorded message which listing all available languages and selects one by pressing a keypad number. We have two types of interactive voice response system. A generic one, which offers the most statistically common European languages, and a specific one organized by families, such as Asian languages or Balkan languages and so on. But I'm not a huge fan of this solution. It has two major flaws. First of all, latency. It introduces a significant delay in our operations. The user has to listen to the prompts, has to wait for its language, and if their language is the last on the list, we lose a lot of time. With the regional interactive voice response system, the operator, the 112 call taker must guess the language family first. And if he misidentifies the sound of the language, picking the wrong group, the IVR will never offer the correct option. So yeah, as I've said, I'm not really a huge fan of this method. We also tested AI-based recognition system as part of the INA Special AI project last year. And while language detection was not the sole objective of the project, the results were remarkable. Uh, we encountered some implementation obstacles in a mixed language scenarios where AI struggled to identify the primary language when the audio stream was kind of polluted by multiple languages. For instance, our call taker answering in Italian, the user trying to talk to English, then switching to their native language. And we know other PSAP face the same confusion for AI. And a proven workaround, which we did not test because the project was very short in time, was just to instruct the caller to speak only in the mother tongue, providing the AI with a clean audio sample to analyze. But yeah, the results we saw were really, really remarkable. So we somehow identified the language. There is actually a crucial step before we even engage the interpreter. It's to verify if it is a genuine emergency, because we need to filter like missed dials, pocket dials without bringing in a third party. This project is vital for two reasons, at least for us. It allows to release the call taker much faster, and it prevents unnecessary service cost of the external interpretation service, keeping our budget efficient. To handle this, we developed, it's just an internal multilingual handbook. It contains a set of really, really simple scripted questions designed to verify if the call is a genuine emergency. And we translated these scripts into the core European languages, which is English, French, German, and Spanish. We try to design them as closed-ended questions as possible, and we are seeking for a binary yes or no answer, basically. The challenge is the human nature, because when the caller doesn't stick to the yes and no answer, they maybe answer with a long sentence or try to add details that we can't understand. In these cases, we have a safety protocol which is really strict. If you are in doubt, or if the caller speaks a language not covered by the handbook, we just escalate to the external interpretation service. So we have identified the language. We have confirmed that it is actually an emergency. Now we enter the phase of the 112 interview. The 112 call taker actually have a choice. They can conduct the interview, at least this is valid for our PSAP strictly. They can conduct interview if they feel fluent in that language enough. We have a really strict principle, which is, I could summarize it with any language, same responsibility. The call taker's liability and the required standard of service are exactly the same as if they were speaking Italian. In other words, if you choose to speak it, you are fully responsible for understanding it. We do actually use this strategy in some cases, but if there is any doubt, the operator takes the second route just by activating the external interpretation service by dialing a dedicated number for that specific language. I mentioned earlier that our CAD is smart enough to identify the country of origin based on the country code. Well, it takes that logic one step further, and it just automatically map that country to the correct dialing number for the translation service. So I'm dialing directly the interpreter, the language that I need. I'm not passing by a menu where I do have to choose a language. Uh, of course, the call taker can manually override the system or select a different language or a different number if the situation requires to do so. Here is a snapshot of the languages we handled in last year, in 2024. While the top bars confirm the impact of tourism with German and English dominating the charts, I want to draw your attention to the growing frequency of so-called minor languages, like look at Urdu, for example, which during the years we experienced like having no request for that language to start using often, more often. Okay. And it represents a rising trend that maybe reflects the change in demographics of our resident population, not just tourists. And year by year, we actually using those minor languages more and more. So we have reached the last phase of the process, which is the call handover to the PSAP tool. I haven't mentioned it, but in Italy we have a two-stage PSAP architecture. So the first stage acts as a filter and basically have the duty to tell where the emergency is, but the actual resource dispatch is handled by the second level PSAP. In this phase, the 112 call taker performs a call transfer, connecting both the user and the interpreter to the PSAP2. The same interpreter stays on the line, so the PSAP2 operator simply takes over the conversation and continues their specific interview, utilizing the same linguistic resource that we already engaged. This is very important. Otherwise, you would have it's better to use an interpreter that already talked to the caller and already know what the situation is instead of activating another different resource that would know nothing about that specific call. Our CAD system also includes a built-in quality feedback tool. Immediately after the call, the call taker can rate the interpretation service by using a familiar five-star system like online reviews, if you know what I mean, and can add specific comments to a free text box. We must be aware of a significant call taker bias because the call takers, from our experience, tend to evaluate the call complexity rather than the interpreter's performance. So if a call involves a difficult geolocation of the emergency and it drags on for minutes, maybe the call taker might give a low rating out of frustration, even if the interpreter's service was technically flawless. So these kind of ratings, at least in our limited experience, reflects more the stress of the event rather than the quality of the translation. So some pros about using a third-party interpretation service. Well, one of the advantages is the uninterrupted coverage, having a service available 24/7, 30 all year round, provides us a safety net that internal staffing couldn't guarantee. And besides some occasional technical faults, which, well, they can happen with any provider, the value lies in the certainty that whenever it's 4 a.m. in the morning, the resource is there when we need it. Of course, the external model is really elastic because it allows us to handle sudden surges in volume and rare languages without increasing our fixed cost. We basically pay what we use, and the capacity is there. Um, so about scalability, yeah, I've told you this is the biggest advantage that we see in the model. Scalability for us work on two levels. Uh, as I said, with volume, the capacity is virtually, and I underline virtually, it's virtually elastic. We can handle multiple concurrent calls in the same language, and the service gives us instant access to a global library of languages, scaling our capability to over, if I'm not wrong, our provider lists about more than 150 different languages. So it's really scalable. This map illustrates our reach perfectly, and we basically we cover at least one of the official languages for every single EU member state and virtually every territory in the wider European region. Uh, However, there is a flip side in using a global provider. They excel at covering standard national languages. They sometimes lack some granularity, which we would love to. This creates a unique challenge in our region, specifically with South Tyrol. I don't know if you know it, but it's a region in Italy, the northern part in Italy, which is near us, where they do actually speak different German dialects. And a global interpreter will speak perfect standard German, but they might struggle to understand the strict South Tyrolean dialects spoken by the locals. So while the macro coverage is excellent, maybe the micro nuances can still be a little bit tricky. Well, about implementation, the beauty of this system is it's really simple. The barrier to entry is basically zero. It just boils down to one simple task, which is updating your phone directories. Yes, you could implement them in your CAD for automatic suggestion of the translation service, which is required, but it's just adding numbers to a phone directory, basically. Uh, Once you sign a contract, you add those dedicated numbers. Well, the system is ready to go. You don't need any complex software integration or any other infrastructure. Uh, Another advantage is our ability to design the contract with a third-party provider. If you carefully define the service level agreement, you can tailor the service to fit what your exact operational needs are. You don't buy a standard package. You can define all the rules of an engagement. You can define response times. You can select a specific portfolio of languages. You can define if it's a pay per use service or if you have a basic fee to pay. It's a private contract. Uh, you can also define quality standards. At least in our case, we require that all the interpreters receive a minimum specific training on 112 protocols and at least on emergency terminology. Okay, they do have to know what an emergency call is, what is the role of a PSAP 1, the 112 in Italy, what will be the role of the PSAP 2. So yeah, in the contract we put that the company that's providing the service has to do this training. Well, cons, of course, I will start with the most obvious one, which is cost. Uh, I hope I won't disappoint anyone, but I will not disclose any specific figure today because cost can vary based on the market, the provider that you choose, the service level agreements that you agree to put on a contract. And I leave it up to you to perform your own cost to benefit analysis. It's up to each of you and each administration, each PSAP to decide what price they're willing to put on a service like this. But it's not a free solution. It's a significant budget item that you must account for. Uh, Another critical aspect is data privacy. If you involve an external provider, we are sharing sensitive citizen data. So we do have a duty to verify the context in which this company operates. It starts with call recording. At least in our case, they do actually record our calls. So where is this call stored? You have to check on their data processing workflow. You have to define retention policies, when the data will be deleted, and you have to ensure compliance with the GDPR regulations. Our strong recommendation, if you're facing this, is to involve your data protection officer when you are defining the contract. This is the only way to verify that the vendor's data processing workflow is really compliant with all the legal and framework that you need to comply to. Well, I mentioned service level agreements as a pros, but we must also view them as a potential risk factor because they need to be as possible, but you have to balance against your available budget. Take the response time. Ideally, I would like 100% of my calls answered in 5 seconds. In the real world, finding a vendor that is capable of guaranteeing this performance is very difficult, and the cost would be mm, 100% higher than what we pay today. So you have to find the right trade-off, a percentage that ensures safety without breaking the bank. And you must weight every single item because a poorly written service level agreement, it's a trap for you if you sign it, because it allows the vendor to deliver a service that falls below, sorry, your expectations, uh, while remaining technically compliant with the contract. And we've learned this the hard way. So just a quick tip for you guys. Quality control. Well, it represents why is it a cons? Because it represents a really significant operational burden. You cannot simply sign a contract and forget about it. You have to verify not just the quantitative service level agreements, like answering times, but also the qualitative accuracy of the translation and interactions. Two main problems here: high standards, which we do need require constant check. And if we stop monitoring, every provider on this planet will drop its quality. So it's an activity that really drains your resources. And you have another problem. I can confidently audit a translation in English. I can somehow manage to do it so in German, but I don't have any knowledge about Polish, Portuguese, Russian, Urdu. Okay. So I have no way to judge if the interpreter is accurate or is making dangerous mistakes, is not following the call taker instructions. And to solve this, you would need an external tool, like some AI-based analysis tools, or you could hire a secondary translation service to check the first one. But both options add complexity and cost to your system. Well, call duration, final drawback, we have to be realistic. Introducing a third party lengthens the process. It starts with the technical activation time. Even with strictest parameter, you have to account the time it takes to dial a number, wait for the pickup, and brief the interpreter. These are dead seconds where you just uh, the rescue system isn't moving forward. So you do have to take that into account. And I'm stressing the time factor so heavily because behind those statistics that I show you, the bar, the charts, there is, of course, a human reality. This is, in the vast majority of the cases, it is a genuine emergency. There is a foreign citizen, scared, far from home, who needs our help. and those seconds of delay, they're for the citizen is just not metrics on a spreadsheet, or it's just, they're not KPI on an evaluation of a service. And here's the proof of the latency that we introduced in the system by using a third-party service translation system. Um, so that's uh, four times a call which is using an interpreter. It's four times as long as one that we handle in Italian. And this is just an average because statistics tend to smooth out the rough edges. And in our daily reality, we can have some calls that takes many more minutes to handle. Why is that? Well, of course, the linguistic barriers. You're speaking two different languages, that a third person which is passing the message, of course, it takes time. Usually the caller, the foreign caller is less oriented. They're unfamiliar with the territory, often unable to recognize landmarks or read local road signs. So they struggle much more than an Italian call taker to help us to know where they are. And we actually do have less technology available, at least here in Italy. If the call is coming from a roaming SIM card, why is that? Well, as I've told you, this is a snapshot of AML activation for roaming devices. It's of some years ago, so that there could have been some updates, but I can tell you that in Italy, as I've told you, we still don't have any AML data for roaming callers. So yeah, that's even a bigger challenge. We do have, like many other nations, a national emergency app. It's a really great tool that could solve the location issue, but it would not solve the language barrier because the app actually lacks an automatic translation feature for the chat. So while the app could solve the location problem, the communication gap would remain wide open. And we must face the adoption rate. Even among Italian residents, I have adoption rate about 2%, not really more than that. So if I look at foreign tourists, the number drops even further, and the adoption rate is near to zero. So we can't rely on this technology for international visitors. A valid alternative is to use a web-based solution. The workflow is simple. I'm sure that many of you already knows this kind of technology. We send an SMS, which contains a web link. The user clicks the link, a browser page opens, provides us precise GPS coordinates, and it enables a real-time chat with automatic translation. It has some limitations. It requires an active data connection, which is not always granted while you are calling 112. It forces you to switch from a voice interaction to a text-based one, which could not be so immediate as speech. And about liability, with our third-party translation provider, the contract explicitly places the liability for the translation accuracy on the provider. With an auto translate chat, we lack this protection. Actually, we have no certification guaranteeing that the engine, which is making that translation, is safe in an emergency context. So you also do have to keep that in mind. So we have analyzed charts, discussed cost, look at different technologies. Mm, what I want to tell you today is that there is no single perfect model that magically solves all the language barriers. There are pros and cons to each one of these. I've showed you the cons that we have in the using a third-party translation provider. So my advice, I think the perfect model is not just a choice between these options, but maybe the integration of more than one to build like an hybrid ecosystem. My advice which is what we are looking for, is not to look for the best tools, but build the strongest system that you can, combining technology, combining different models. Um, my most criticism of the model that we adopted here in our 112 here in Trento, we have no plan B, actually, okay? We rely on a single external provider, so we are creating a single point of failure. In worst case scenario, total technical blackout of the vendor, we are left exposed. We have no official way to process the call, other than maybe using external tools which are not certified for using in an emergency context. We also face resource saturation because the resources of the provider are not, they have limits. So if the only available interpreter for a specific language is busy, we wait for the line to clear, or maybe hope that the caller speak enough a second language so we can switch to that language and call that interpreter. So just my ideal model, if I could designing from scratch and I have the maximum freedom of doing it, would be three human layers. Like a first layer where your internal staff, maybe it's bilingual or multilingual, um, so they can handle the immediate demand for multilingual calls. A second layer, you could rely on a professional external interpretation service, as we do, to ensure global coverage and reliability. You could add a third layer, a volunteer-based scheme, maybe not in terms of backup, but to cover local dialects, as I've told you, with the problems that we have in South Tyrol. And in my ideal model, it would be great to have a technology that check on all of these. There may be a real-time transcription system to aid the operator and translation, a text-to-speech capabilities to allow the system to speak to the caller if needed, a chat interface with automatic certified translation. Yeah, that would be my ideal model. So while we wait for this ideal model, some of you maybe will build that, maybe it will be me, but I want to leave you with some practical recommendation if you decide to go to the third party road. Master your service level agreements. When writing the contract, look at the whole picture, define a specific language portfolio, also the quality inputs, what certification should the interpreters hold. When you do not underestimate the workload, it's not just about how many calls per language, but how long they last. Because if you underestimate the data, the vendor will use it as an excuse to justify missed targets, claiming unexpected workload increase. Ask me how I know it. Quality control strategy. I've told you, you need a plan for auditing. Will you invest in checking all the languages, or you just accept the risk that you can truly audit the quality of maybe one or two or three languages? Independent monitoring. These companies provide you a dashboard with all the data and this is good, but always cross-reference their data with your internal logs. Call takers training. Yeah, technology is useless without procedures, so train your call takers how to use the system, define protocols for every scenario, at least what you can predict, and be prepared because for the hidden workload, a new vendor means a new contract to manage, monthly monitoring, applying penalties. It requires a really active management. So this concludes my presentation. Thank you once again to Ina and all of you for your attention. And I'm now available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Gianluca, for this presentation. It was very comprehensive, and I think we all got some new ideas. There's already some questions in the Q&A part, so I can read these out to you. Salvatore is asking, What specific obstacles prevent AML enablement for roaming users and language parsing within your system? Have you quantified the potential savings that getting the language via AML could bring?
Okay, that's great questions. I can't go much into details about this because I don't know all the backgrounds. I know that the Italian infrastructure, which is receiving the ML data, is preparing to also show us the language of the operative system of the caller, but it's not yet a reality. We have quantified or at least to a certain extent, the impact that this would have. Last year, we used an interactive voice response system because we had no clue about the language that was used. We used it about 10 times, but that's really, really a last case scenario. If you don't have any clue, then you're activating IVRs, but you know it's gonna take maybe minutes to find the right one. Okay. There are daily circumstances where maybe um, the caller tries to speak a language, but he cannot do it. His SIM card is from a country, but his native language is another one. Uh, well, that would really simplify our task actually, because we're not only talking about a call taker, which is taking care of the call, so he's busy and he cannot answer other calls. We are also taking about minutes that passes to handle an emergency.
Thank you. And then we have another question from Benoit Deville. I will read the whole thing. It's a bit longer paragraph. So do you think that support between PSAPs at the European level could be a possible solution for foreign calls? This would allow us to work with the staff who are already trained for emergency situations and probably familiar with the caller's culture. And since these staff are already on duty 24/7, I imagine we could have a fairly quick response time, faster than your provider. In that case, we could only use an external company as a last resort or a very specific language. It would certainly be more difficult to implement, but probably cheaper and more efficient. What do you think?
Well, thank Benoit for the question. I do think it could be more difficult to put in place. It would be a great resource, but in another way, uh, we are like by leveraging another PSAP, we could be in another country. We are also waiting on their resources. It's true that they maybe have the social context and the language experience to handle that call, but if we are reaching a PSAP in another country, they maybe won't have the geographical information that we have. It would be difficult to transfer information between PSAP, like location data or cartography, or so we would use a really big expertise, just like a translation service. Uh, it comes also to my mind that we would use a call taker, which could not be trained for a translation service. So yeah, there are pros and cons about all of these methodologies and way to approach the issue.
Thank you. Then we have a little comment from Veronica with quite a few questions. I will read these all and maybe you can give a general answer to them as we don't have so much time left. But Veronica is an in-house interpreter from 112 Valencia. And she's asking, have you considered the possibility of employing in-house interpreters trained specifically in crisis communication and emergency management protocols for the major languages, while relying on external providers for minority languages? Additionally, how is the interpreting service operationally integrated into the emergency call workflow? Are interpreters trained in emergency procedures, geography, and the relevant legal and jurisdictional aspects? Are callers explicitly informed that the third party will join the line? How is the communication coordinated within PSAP operators, ERTs, when applicable, interpreters and callers are on the same line?
Well, lot of questions. So, okay, I'll try to go in order. Well, about the possibility of employing in-house interpreters, there is a possibility. Thing is that, at least in our region, we do not have a constant workflow for the interpreter. As I've showed you in my data, it's really seasonal. There are weeks and months where let's take a Spanish interpreter where his work would be near to zero. So, and it's really difficult from a cost perspective to justify having these resources available all the time without actually using them. It would be great because you could train specifically in crisis communication. Yeah, that's for sure. But we do have also to take into consideration costs and organization and also scalability of the system. We are a small PSAP, but even if I would be bigger, would be a problem for me to hire a lot of interpreters, which just has to do that. The later question was how is it integrated in the operational workflow? Well, the interpreter acts as an instrument for the call taker. They do have to know some basic information about 112 and emergency systems, but we do not ask the interpreter to make the call taker job. Okay, the call taker will use the same procedures that he uses in Italian, just by through the help of an interpreter, which will just interpret that conversation. Oh, I lost all the questions. I don't see them anymore. I was reading the Q&A section.
I think in the answered section, the Veronica's question moved there. If you
Okay. I don't know if I answered all of them, but uh, okay. Are training emergency procedures the interpreters kind of, or at least what is the role of 112? What is the role of the PSAP2? What is the interview look like? Uh, but again, they have just to follow the call taker instructions and to translate the answers. They are working in a worldwide level, so they do not have any train about about the geographic of our region, because by going with a third-party service provider, they are outsourcing their all the interpreters are not all of them are in Italy. They could be abroad, and with modern technology, you can just use an interpreter which is in Australia or somewhere else. So it's not possible to have them trained for our specific geographical region. Are callers informed that a third party will join the line? Yes, of course. We in the multilingual handbook that we internally developed, we do have translation for I'm going to call an interpreter that will help us. Okay, and he will be presenting himself to the caller. How is communication coordinated within PSAP operators, interpreters, and callers on the same line? Well, it's a mess because you do have an emergency, you do have panic, you do have all the emotional part of the call. You have a call taker which is trying to be as fast as possible. You do have an interpreter which has to listen carefully to what the caller is saying, which is also part of the emotional stress of the call. Then you would have to engage with another subject, which is the PSAP2. It can get really tricky and complicated.
Thank you. Then maybe we can take the last question from Irache. Now we're coming to the end of the webinar. So she's asking, for Winter Olympics next year, are you planning on expanding the number of languages potentially covered?
Our contract, because I've told you that our external provider offers 150 languages, and we do have different tariffs for different languages. There are common languages which has a tariff, maybe more rare languages that has another cost, and you do have on-demand languages. They're not on the contract, but if they're on the service provider availability, you can um, you can use them. Of course, the cost is different because the company won't know how often you would use them, so the cost is higher. But yeah, we wrote a contract so that we don't need actually to change it for like the Winter Olympics or any other major events that we might host. It usually covered all of our needs.
All right, thank you very much, Gianluca, for presenting. It was a very insightful webinar, and we have more webinars coming up next year. They will be all announced on our website, so you can all follow that. And we will also have a little event next week in Brussels. I will put link to the chat. If anyone is interested, you can still register for that. So thank you everyone for participating, and thank you again, Gianluca, for speaking, and we'll see you everyone on the next webinar. Have a good day.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.